Hello, everyone. Welcome to Recommentary podcast. Today, our topic is one of the most interesting and relevant topics, very contemporary. A topic is civil service as a career option, past, present, and future. So, with me, I have some of my dear friends whom I have started my civil service journey, and some of them have pursued civil services as a career, and some of them haven't. And today, we are going to discuss about a few comments that have come up in the public media that that has gotten at nation's attention, and I think that deserves a longer discussion. And I'm so happy that I've got my friends here to talk about this. We've been in this journey for quite a long time, and a lot of personally for me, I've gained a lot, learned a lot of lessons from that. So I'm hoping that in this conversation they share their learnings, they share their experiences, and have a candid discussion. So I would introduce our guest today. Before that, I'll just introduce myself. I'm Gautam Jayasurya. I'm the founder and the owner of Recommentary, the podcast, which I'm sure you'll be listening. If you're tuning in, I'm sure you're familiar with. I am My full-time job is that of a talent strategy manager at Accenture. I've before I've been an HR business partner, a management consultant, a public policy practitioner, rural development practitioner, and so on. I did my graduation in law. I did my master's in human resource management. Podcasting is my passion, and this is one of the ventures I'm into. So thank you for tuning in. And I'll introduce Deepak. Deepak is currently serving as a banker with SBI. He's been a civil service aspirant before. He's an engineer from CET Trivandrum. I've known him now for over almost close to 10 years. So we're a very good friend of mine. Looking forward to speaking to you. Looking forward to hearing from you. Then I have Gokul with me. Gokul has also donned many hats. He's right now a digital marketer, marketer at way.com. He's been a teacher for civil service students. He's been a content creator, copywriter. He's been a journalist. He's done his post graduation from Asian School of Journalism and graduation from Sri Chitra Sirunal's College of Engineering, Trivandrum. And I have Sidharth, uh, who is uh, who is the insider here today. He's the IRPOS officer from the Ministry of Railways. He's currently serving at that, and he's served as a program manager at Additional Skill Acquisition Program before, and he's done his BTech from CET Trivandrum. So that's a long introduction, but welcome all of you. Let's hear from you. So today we have met because there has been a comment made by Sanjeev Sanyal, who is a member of the Economic Advisory Council to the Prime Minister. To quote him, he said UPSC is a waste of time, in the sense that the youth of this country is wasting their peak years preparing for civil services year after year. And he termed it as poverty of aspiration, and he also called it he did it because he felt that there are other ways to spend the time. There are better ways to get return on your time and energy, things like entrepreneurship and other things. So over the top, what are your views? Let's start with Deepak. What do you think about this comment? What are your two bits about it?
Okay, thanks for the opportunity, Gautam. So basically, you see what Sanjeev Sanyal said has is practically right for all purposes. But the way it has been taken or been received and been criticized and pulled up by the media, I think that is where the entire thing went haywire. So if you actually look at the few basic numbers from 11 lakhs who start with the preliminary stage of the UPSC exam, success rate comes down to less than 1%. That is 1,000 odd candidates. And if we look at the pattern, the numbers have been vacancies have been dwindling over the years. And again, like you mentioned in your introductory remark, the poverty of aspiration. So the fact that the people, when those who are one step closer or maybe one more attempt, and people who have this mindset, this cycle keeps on repeating like a hamster for them. They are just like a hamster in a ring, and they don't know when to
Yeah.
have an exit route. And I think
Mm.
he's been very frank and upfront when he made that remark actually. So I think the way it has been received has been the wrong because like everybody, like I believe that UPSC is just one career option.
Yeah.
I totally understand because having been there and right now having taken a middle path when I couldn't make the cut, and I'll be bluntly honest that still date at times I feel regret for not being able to have been into that list. Or again, when I see people who are actually there inside the service, and when I compare, but I think that's just human psychology because grass is always greener on the other side. So I think
Right.
the mindset has to change. That UPSC is just one career option, and in that context, if I see Sanjeev Sanyal's remark, they were right for all practical purposes, but probably the way he presented it, it went off in the wrong direction, and it has been taken blown up by the media out of proportion.
Got it. And there's a lot of romanticism around this career path. Gokul, your thoughts on that?
Oh, obviously, I agree with that. I mean, my first thoughts go back to I think there was this an English novel called English August, right, which is a very famous novel about an IAS officer trying to, you know, do his work in a very rural part of India. But I think that romanticism is definitely a part of the reason why so many multitudes of people are, going towards this examination. In fact, if you come to Mr. Sanjeev Sanyal's remarks, there's something that I would like to actually pick, which is I think the context of what he said. If you notice that he said that there's no problem with writing the exam if you have clarity about what it takes to be an administrator or what an administrator does. You know, now to add to your point about romanticism, currently what people know about an administrator is only this romanticism. They actually don't know more about the nuances of what goes on in the field, the internal politics internal and external politics, which that can probably tell us. But I think there is a lot of romanticism and a lot of putting people on pedestals, especially because there is social media worship these days. And I think the younger crop of IAS officers and civil servants are also on social media where they post their journeys and stuff. So I think I mean if you want to interpret Mr. Sanyal's comments, um, he assumes that everybody has clarity about what an administrator does. The fact is, not everybody does, and that romanticism that built up, that history, that sort of like putting people on a pedestal, that is all part of this culture of reverence that has been created. Which I mean, there's a lot of things wrong with it. It's part of society,
Mm.
not just a civil services thing. But there's a lot that we need to unpack before we can go forward.
Yeah. Yeah. Uh, I think the key takeaway here is lack of clarity. Sidharth, what is your thoughts on that? I mean, personally, did you feel a lack of clarity at any point, and how do you overcome it? Love to know that.
See, a lack of clarity, I don't think, matlab, personally, I would feel around 95% of us don't really understand what an IAS officer or any other civil servant does for that matter while we are preparing, right? Because it's only during the training period and frankly, during the training for my particular service, even during the training period, we didn't really understand what it is that we are actually going to do when we are on the field. It's during the work with common sense, with hard experience that you learn the work of an administrator. So to expect a general person who's just starting his preparation or is even is a veteran of preparation to understand what kind of work goes in is unrealistic is what I feel. And to add to the fact, like what Deepak and Gokul were mentioning, and the context of Mr. Sanyal's take, he was talking from the context of a poverty of aspiration as to, and I mean I could relate to that. Uh, why did we take engineering? Like myself personally, why did I take engineering? Because at that point of time, I did not know about the other aspects, so the other avenues of careers. So why did I go for UPSC after engineering? What else do you do? At that point of time we did not know any better, and that is changing now. So what Mr. Sanyal is saying is correct in the sense that because of social media, because of the access that internet provides, that is changing, and the lure of UPSC is reducing a bit. at least, if you can say. Because I mean, when I was listening to listening to what Mr. Sanyal was saying, one of the things that caught my attention was that if you look at where the hubs of UPSC are, they are not commercial hubs. Delhi, and even in Kerala, if you see, it's in Trivandrum, it's not in Kochi. Why? And in India, it's in Delhi and not in Bombay. Why? If you have other options, if you have other, very legitimate career options are presented in front of you, then I would say that nobody would go for UPSC, because I mean, we all know people who have left lucrative jobs and come here. So if you have a legitimate career opportunity, then I would say that only a few people would come to UPSC, a few who actually aspire to be administrators and have some sort of an understanding of what it might entail. So that's what I feel it comes down to.
Ultimately, this civil service is you working for the organization of Government of India. A lot of organizations these days try to present what happens inside the job in a more palatable way, right? If you look at even if you look at any of the bigger brands out there, we all know what a marketing manager perhaps does for a Unilever, or we know what a finance manager does for a certain other company. Even for that matter, we know what a banker would do for SBI to some extent. But it's very much in the shadows. Very much there is a veil around what happens inside the bureaucracy. What are some of the day-to-day tasks? What kind of skill sets are required to grow in that? What kind of people with what kind of competencies are going to succeed in that? How do you even grow in civil services? So a lot of things. I mean, unless you have the idea about a lot of things, it's very difficult for a layperson, like you said, to take a call on whether to go for it or not. Because fundamentally, you're choosing a career path. Of course, it's a lot of other things, but it's a career path at the end of the day. It's a job at the end of the day. So it's a personality to job fit that you need to ensure. So I want to come back to Sidharth on that, because you're best positioned to comment on that, because you're the insider here. And so how different is the expectation of becoming a civil servant, all that glamour and glitz around it, and the reality of being there and doing the hard yards?
See, what I understand is that bureaucracy in general, at least in India, and I guess since it's modeled upon the British bureaucracy almost everywhere is very regimented, as in it is very rule oriented. The leeway that you have, I mean, the kind of the glamour that we mentioned, the things that we see on social media, and before that, with the things that we saw on the news and all those things, the collectors, doing all these amazing things. It's like you want, the tip of the iceberg, you can say, because the actual work is basically moving files day in day out. You have to, so to take a decision like that, to come in front of the TV and give, like, a statement like that, you need a lot of hours working on these files to get the correct approvals, and all those things take up a lot of time and require a lot of patience. And it's about how to grow is, see, the thing about government services, fortunately or unfortunately, we are not geared to efficiency, right? It's not about efficiency is not a benchmark. It's about getting to the next day. It's almost always we are on a firefighting mode, right? There's not enough people to do the required work. There's just way too much work. We are providing way too much with way less, resources. So that kind of a thing always happens all the time, everywhere. And it's not because there are no resources. It's just they're not allotted, in an optimum manner, and that is not prioritized. So how to go forward? And the main reason for that is, uh, see what in Southern Railways, like where I work, we keep on saying that it's a rule based zone. It's a very rule based zone,
Yeah.
wherein rather than to get the output, we are more focused on procedure. So Southern Railways is more rule based within railways, right? Railways in general is a government organization which is very rule based. Like, if you, like what Gautam was mentioning before, we don't know how a bureaucracy works. Like, for example, when you're traveling in a train, you just notice that the train has stopped for no reason at all, right? Why is this train not moving? Why is it just stopping there? But then I mean, off the top of my head, I can give you 15 legitimate reasons as to why the train was stopping there, and all of them do with different departments, and things that minute things that have gone wrong with various departments within railways, as to why that train needs to stop there. And that cannot be explained over a short period of time. there are way too many rules, way too many manuals, way too many codes and circulars and all those things within which we have to do the work. So to grow in a civil service, what I understand is, one, you need to understand what you're doing. Like for example, uh, from the time that I remember, we had around 25 to 28 civil services in Group A services. Each one of them, to my understanding, does a niche job. Initially, I was, when you get into the service, you have an idea that except for IAS, IPS, and IFS, Baki Sabka is almost the same. But that is not the case. Now, after a point of time, I understand that each one of them, though you can call it general management or a general administration, in a very layman's term, but what I understand is each of these organizations are different. Their goals are different. So you can generalize it by saying it is that, it is welfare of the people or service providing. But what I understand is that they're all different, and you need to understand what the organization needs to provide, which I think is pretty common in a private organization. It works in a private organization as well. You need to understand what it is that the product that you're giving, and how you can, what is it that the customer needs. Like for myself, I am right now looking at the HR for railway employees. So I need to know. I mean, if to improve upon my work, I would need to know what it is that the what an employee of ours, a staff of ours, is actually doing on the field, so that I can try to improve it a little bit for him or her, for that matter. So, and the rules in civil service, if you have to get along, and so we have been noticing that there are a lot of popular civil servants, but I have seen very few civil servants who are actually good civil servants and are popular. So that overlap I have seen is very little. So to be a good bureaucrat, I understand that your knowledge of rules and what you can and cannot do needs to be very strong, and there needs to be a huge level of intrinsic motivation. Because trust me, there is no one who is going to ask you to do something unless you can think of it, unless you can yourself think and go ahead and do something. There is nobody. Because I mean, I see a lot of people. We all know the general idea of what a government office is like, right? So if I do something, if I don't do something, I'm getting paid anyway, and I'm not getting fired either. It's that, like, job security, what we used to call, it's very difficult to fire you. It's not job security. Nobody wants to put in that much trouble. So so to get better at a civil service career or as a bureaucrat, patience is number one thing, which is what we learned while during the preparation, right? Patience and note making, getting to know these rules and all those things. Like for example, when a collector is declaring a holiday on a rainy day, he's not just paying attention to the weather, right? He has like hundreds of other things to look into. It's like, probably what it might be is, there might be the number of centimeters it has rained, or the areas in within a district. Like, it has to be, the number has to be beyond these many taluks or beyond these many centimeters. Those all might be written down. You cannot just make a decision on your own. That has to be approved by a concerned person, and only then you can. I mean, that's my understanding. I don't know the details, but that's probably how it is.
No, it's totally valid also, because what I feel is if you are able to link the application process to a job to the job in itself on a day-to-day basis, I think that will make a massive impact, because then you are tangibly saying, why are you doing this? Why are you studying, let's say, geography? So in the end, that application of the knowledge can be there on the field. So I think that connection somewhere is missing. Maybe if you can we can discuss more in the recommendation segment. But I think that's a key takeaway for me in this. I would open the same question up to Deepu and Gokul also, because Deepu, I know for a fact that he himself has personally told me many times, what could have done better in these organizations, in his own organization and the organizations that he come across in his friends. And Gokul, I'm sure you also would have used. So I would want to hear your views also on this.
Okay. So one thing I would perfectly agree with what Siddharth said is that, in bureaucracy, in bureaucratic or government organizations, or when it comes to public sector, you're never geared for efficiency. You're actually taught just how to do a damage control, actually. That is typical for any public sector organization, including mine, where, efficiency is not a parameter. or the only parameter for you to go up is that you have to be in the good books and not be in the bad books, or you have to make sure that you don't make any mistake. That is all you have to ensure. You don't have to ensure that whether it's your organization progressing or are you actually creating the impact for which your organization was built. So that is
Correct.
one major aspect that I have noticed, and that is a ingrained, or that is entrenched into all the public sector and bureaucratic any legacy organizations. So that goes like for railways or for an organization for the size of SBI. So that is one major challenge that I also face or I have experienced. Now, the second aspect I would, that comes into this question is, uh, like I mentioned, the grass is always greener on the other side. So when I look at it from my perspective, I see that people who, again, there is a lot of social media influence in here, or there is, like he said, there is a lot of news and there is a lot of TV influence that comes over because I am at the other side of the bureaucracy, or I am at the other side and the public when it comes to civil servant. So when I see the grass is always greener on the other side. So basically, when I see my own friends, batchmates who are actually inside the services, and when I have a feeling, it may be true or may not be true, but when I get a feeling that they are creating more impact than what I am able to do at this point, or when I see that they are able to become a lot more productive, or they are contributing a lot more, then that is when this feeling of dejection comes in. Or like I mentioned that okay, maybe had I done a little, pushed myself a little more better rather than making the exit at that point, perhaps I would have been on the other side. So this feeling of dejection, I think, that is where actually Sanjeev Sanyal's remark, actually we have to read that. Because all the aspirants are like a hamster in a ring. They don't know when to make an exit. There are people who actually have reached uh, gone beyond their employable age, or there are people who have actually now who don't have a clarity on what to do because their attempts are exhausted. They cannot seek support from their home, or who cannot now enter into a formal job sector because the gap in their resume is too much. So these are the areas actually where I actually agree with the remark that Sanjeev Sanyal's remark comes into prominence, because it's practically right. You need to know when to make an exit. So I think that is where I would read this remark, and I would partially agree with him. Not 100%, because it's never a waste of time. Like you, Gautam, you mentioned the vast reading or the kind of exposure we get when we prepare for civil services, the knowledge or the facts and figures that we learn, or the ability to present a 9-mark answer in 250 words in 8 minutes, the analysis skill, these are never gone away, these are never a waste, provided you are able to put good use to them in your job. They'll always help you. So it's not a waste of time, but you need to know when to make an exit.
Gokul, you are somebody who had made a successful exit, so to say. I mean, generally in business world, exits are often great, great occasion because that's when startups make money, right? And likewise, you and me, I mean, to some extent, Deepu also made an exit at some point. So I want to hear your thoughts. What was the mindset when you made that exit? How did you evaluate? Okay, this is the point. I need to move on.
When I decided to make an exit, it was not actually an exit, I understand. It was more of a coincidence, because it was during my second phase, or second attempt, when I went up to the interview stages, and coincidentally that I cracked this exam with SBI. So that is when I decided, okay, maybe now I have reached an interview stage. So maybe I should take up the job because the gap in my resume is increasing. And probably even if I don't make it, I can maybe, prepare alongside with my job and manage. But I think that is where again, almost for 2 to 3 years, I had a feeling that, okay, maybe I should not have taken up this job, and maybe I should have continued my preparation so that I could have made the cut. Because one point I would like to add here is, all these exams, whether it be an exam for a civil service, or whether you look at other banking exams like SBI or Reserve Bank of India, or you look at other autonomous organizations like SEBI, or International Financial Services, or the insurance exam, all these exams are never overlapping. All the requirements they have is different. So but the pool of candidates they have is common. Every person who's not been able to make it into UPSC, or people who are looking for a career B, the pool is common actually here. So I think, even though we make an exit somewhere down the line, even at the back hindsight, or sometimes like a flash, this feeling of dejection creeps in at times. But you have to live with it. You don't have an option. Life moves on, right? It doesn't stop.
Yeah, and yeah. So I think the way I evaluated it was, so there's something that Siddharth mentioned, right, about the intrinsic motivation to join this particular civil services. So at every point, like after every attempt, I sort of evaluated my intrinsic motivation and what that was, because I believe that at this point in time there is a lot of intellectual, you could call it dishonesty, maybe intellectual dishonesty, about why aspirants are really writing the exam. The boilerplate response people will give you is that I want to do public service, mujhe desh ka seva karna hai, inke naadne, like, I want to serve the public. I am somebody who is a very blunt, like I was very, very true to myself from the start. I wanted to join the civil services because of the career progression and definitely the prestige and the kind of application of my skills that I thought I would be able to pursue. But with every passing year, like the opportunity cost was just getting too high. you know
Hmm.
um, every year that you spend learning more knowledge and just trying to clear this exam is 1 year of a skill or an external, skill that you are actually losing. So I gave 3 attempts at the exam, with like varying degrees of failure. And at the end, I took a margin call. I was like, is this something that I want to continue? Because obviously at that point the sunk cost fallacy also kicks in. You
Yeah.
think that, okay, I've invested 3 or 4 years into this, maybe let's
Hmm.
try it one more time. So that sort of a mindset also comes in. But I think I was very clear that it's time for me to move on, because there are other ways, or there are other roles that I can aspire to. you know
Yeah.
so I think that is also where you can sort of interpret Mr. Sanjeev Sanyal's comment, the poverty of aspiration. You are actually poor in your aspiration if you believe that being a bureaucrat is the only thing that you can ever become. you know in corporate speak, you may have heard of this term called pivot. Startups
Yeah.
always pivot. I work in a startup right now.
Yeah.
Pivoting is essentially when you figure out that you are not good, or something is not working, and then you change something about that business or about yourself. I think aspirants need to have that, um, the ability to finally take a call and pivot into something else and aspire to be something equally good. It's not
Hmm.
that, okay, you were it was not a worthy aspiration to be a bureaucrat. It was, but it didn't work out. Let's pivot, move on to something else. So that was my logic when I moved on.
The ways you can pivot. You mentioned about pivot, and I completely 100% agree with that. I mean, all the topics you've touched upon are the topics that and when I was learning human resource management, that came in our syllabuses, right? Opportunity cost, sunk cost fallacy, pivoting, and all that. So it's very relevant also. Personally, strikes a chord with me. So pivoting, when you said of pivoting, the first thing that came to mind, you successfully pivoted from, let's say, from a engineering graduate to becoming a civil servant, a civil service aspirant, and then to a journalist. So how did that transition happen? Was that transition smooth because you knew you were good at expressing yourself through words and other forms, and then you build on that? Is that how it happened, or there was another thought process altogether?
So I'll correct you there. I actually
Okay.
did my engineering, then I did my journalism degree, and then I
Oh,
worked for a
okay.
year, and then,
Got it.
yeah. So that was the progression that I had. But definitely that sort of, the experience that I had and that mindset that I had, was built because it came through a process of elimination. I was sure about what I did not want to be. So after engineering, I sucked at coding. So I was like, I'm not probably not going to be a good software engineer or something. So let's pivot into doing something that I want to do, something that I like to do, and that's how ended up in engineering. And obviously, sorry, in journalism. And definitely in journalism, you have that public service component. It's sort of like, writing for the public, holding people to power, accountability, things like that. And that sort of segued into, okay, why not try for the civil service exam? Um, and and then throughout that journey, I was also able to have, or I had the privilege of being able to sort of work and exercise my skills as well along with my studies. So it was not that I had completely dissociated myself from the working world. So in that respect, when it came for me to finally take a call and exit from the civil service journey, I think I had that exit route in front of me. So I had that privilege to say that, okay, now I can do this. I can go on to something better. So I think, to answer your question, I've always pivoted based on um, the least stupid thing to do. So I knew that staying on in engineering would be a stupid thing to do. I knew that staying on and writing the civil service exam again and again and again would be a stupid thing to do. So I just eliminated the stupid options and then, yeah, moved on. So that was my rationale.
Do you have any view on this? I mean, you must have seen your friends, your people around you trying to make a pivot. Have you seen any successful pivots? I mean, obviously, one model is to do a postgraduate exam, which I personally did, and the other could be to build upon what you have, what you've done in the graduation, or your intrinsic skills, and add on to that. Have you seen any other experience around you on this?
Yeah, as a matter of fact, I've seen quite a few examples. Like, say, the most common one that we see is people join the academy itself in which they were studying as mentors or, faculty is there itself. Other people have started whole new academies on their own accord and making huge profit too, by the way. So, like, I mean, so what Mr. Sanyal was saying, people have actually started entrepreneurship through UPSC as well. That is another aspect, right? So I mean, that is there. But then, other than that, I have seen a lot of people go back to their back to their career from which they had actually taken a break and come to UPSC. I have seen a lot of people do that. I have seen a lot of people take completely different career options afterwards. So I think Munir was an example, right? Munir, along with you, right? A few people had taken a totally different career view, some similar career. Like you have taken a totally different career view. Munir, somewhat similar, right? He was a doctor, and we went ahead and did further in public health. So a lot of, I mean, I've seen people go back to. I think Ron went back into legal matters as well, right? A lot
Yeah,
of people I had seen, a lot of people I have seen, and see, those were, to my understanding, those were very legitimate and very intelligent decisions. I myself, when I started with the preparation, I was very clear on one fact that not more than two or a maximum of three attempts, because it does not make sense otherwise. Because you see it as a vortex that it is, because every time you feel key just a little bit more, because you're losing your prelims at 1 or 2 marks, you're losing your mains by 10 or 20 marks, you're seeing people who have prepared less than you score better than you. The fact that there is so much luck involved and so much subjectivity involved in the mains as well as in the interview process, so which is why I say it should not be just one attempt, because there's a lot of luck involved. So at least two and a maximum of three. I was pretty sure that after three, I mean, I should be trying something else. Now, what that was, I never got around to it. They cleared in my second attempt, and afterwards, I just kept on writing because I had my backup and I knew what my career was going to be, if nothing else. So I just kept on writing because I could afford to. Like, I mean, I had a very strong backup plan. I had a job in hand, so I could keep on doing what I wanted to. So that is the thing. So even within the service, I have actually seen people quit the service within the first 2 3 years and go back to doing something else. Probably something that they wanted. I have a friend who quit and went back to being a CA. He was a CA, got into the services. Within 2 years, he was like, "This is not my cup of tea," and he went back and he's now a practicing chartered accountant. So quite a few of those examples as well. And another,
yeah.
yeah. just one more thing.
Yeah, go
So,
on,
I
go on,
mean, a
Sanjeev.
lot of people that, yeah, a lot of people that I am talking to within the service right now, a lot of them have an aspiration of, having reached a level of expertise within the government, within the bureaucracy of around 10 to 15 years of experience, then doing a post graduation and then moving out, diverging into different fields, like probably into private sector or NGOs or otherwise. There are those career options as well while staying within the bureaucracy. There are officers that I've seen who have that plan as well.
So personally, for me, the point in which I realized the civil service could be like uh, a choice that wouldn't make sense for me is when I realized the preliminary exam was based on a lot of recollection, a lot of memorizing, a lot of making mental maps, connecting otherwise disconnected areas of knowledge into a cohesive unit where you can map and recollect at the point of the exam. Now, for me, I realized that that's not one of my strengths. Recollection, memorizing is not one of my strengths. My strength is probably articulation of ideas or problem solving or creative solutioning, looking at issues in a holistic 360-degree way. Yes, that was tested probably at a later stage, at an interview stage or at a main stage. But to be reaching there itself in itself requires a lot of fundamental memorizing and recollection. So that was one of my first signs in realizing that maybe this is not for me. But even then, even after realization, I must be very honest that I've led myself on, thinking that this could be like an aberration. Maybe there is a probability out there where I am qualifying an exam. Maybe this time is an aberration, this time is an exception. But yeah, I think that echo chamber exists partially also because of the people around you, because you're seeing other people succeed. You are around your family who are constantly like motivating you to take attempts over and over again. Perhaps maybe they wish the well for you, but ultimately, it kind of backfires because you're wasting your most productive years. Maybe learning something that you could use otherwise, you can rebuild your career that way. So I want to know, what kind of influence the society has been on yourself and what you've seen around you. And I mean, like Gokul was mentioning through chat, is there a toxic positivity around it? Is there some elements of pop culture, like the movies that are getting released, the TV series that came out recently, Aspirants, the movie that came out, 12th Fail. Are there elements around us, including pop culture and family and everybody, that is pushing maybe to a lesser optimized choice? Before I want to start with you because I know you are a big fan of these series also. So I will start with you.
Okay, fine. So yeah, basically, like I mentioned, these kind of series, the movie called 12th Failed or the series Aspirants, did certainly strike a chord with me. Because basically, the fact that these struck a chord with me was because I was, the main protagonist in the story. I was able to connect with all those emotions, the kind of uncertainty they are dealing with, or the desperacy, or the thought process. Because when I was during writing my mains, I was like, okay, fine. If I get it into the rank list, this is what I want to do, or this is what will be my action things, or these are what I wish to do. These kind of fantasy thoughts, or these kind of, because like Siddharth mentioned initially, we don't know what happens inside actually unless we get in. So we all have this fantasy thoughts. And for any Malayali, whoever was born in the 1990s, Joseph Alex Devali Parambil was certainly one push why he wanted to write the exam. So, all
Right.
these kind of fantasy thoughts, etc., were running in my mind. So yeah, these series they, certainly from an entertainment point of view, as well as somewhere down the line, all the emotions that the protagonist went through connects to me. And in this context, I actually want to bring Siddharth once again. I wanted to have a question. I had always this feeling, because all these series, that movies that we see, these glorify the three services, like the IAS and IPS, these services. But like he mentioned, there are almost 20 plus other Group A services and Group B services that recruit through the UPSC. So two questions actually. First is, the people who did not make it into the All India services or the elite services, do they actually live with the disappointment that they had they pushed themselves better, they could have been there? And is this kind of resentment do you see amongst your batchmates, people who did not get it into the IAS, but they have to make do with the service they are in right now? And how does
Yeah,
it
yeah,
affect your
every day.
efficiency?
Every day. Lord, there is so much resentment. there is so much resentment in my own service. And like, so in railways we have three services, right? Railways, so I am in the Indian Railway Personnel Service. There's a railway account service and a railway traffic service as well. The railway traffic service calls itself the IAS of railways. That should tell you something, right? So there is, I mean, some of it comes from a healthy place, some of it not so much. There is like, see, I myself feel that dejection on a daily basis. Ki yaar, matlab, now that since election season is here, you see the kind of power that a district collector has. And so I have been nominated as a nodal officer for postal ballot in for railways in my jurisdiction. And I am firsthand seeing the kind of overarching powers that a district collector has in Palakkad district. So I know कि मतलब हम क्या ही उखाड़ रहे हैं. That kind of a feeling we get, you know. So it's a daily basis thing. I mean, see, but then the way I ground myself is that uh, the kind of power that they are having, the responsibility and accountability on them is that much more. I can afford to not look at my phone after 6 p.m. Matlab, not much is going to go wrong with the world if I don't attend a call, right? But that is not the case when you are thrusted with that much power. So that is how I ground myself. Okay, I have a good work-life balance. I mean, you can call it Zagreb syndrome, but you know, if you want to have that much power, there is, like what Gokul was mentioning, there is an opportunity cost. There is no family life. There is no other life for that matter. You are always on the call. So, like, for example, in such a crisis situation, like, and to be frank, the crisis situation, the firefighting is on a daily basis in all organizations. So, when your organization is that, like, for example, recently I was talking to a batchmate who is in the police service. He is done. He's fed up with his life. He's like, कि, भाई, like, you know, in the subah 2 baje calls are कि there is a law and order issue somewhere, or there is another curfew somewhere else. There is something else, like minor issues, major issues. So there is resentment amongst all of the other lower services, if you want to. That it's just like, what are they doing so much? Ki 5 mark ka hi to difference tha. You know, that kind of a thing creeps in every conversation. It is true, but then we all know it's not coming from a very healthy place, because so that resentment is always there. But then we do have a lot of friends, and they keep us telling, you know, it's so difficult, and they have an envy. Some of them have an envy on the other way around. At least you get to spend time, you know, have your own time and all those things. I don't know. It depends on the individual. It's very subjective, but the resentment is there. Yes.
Okay. Yeah. So to answer your question, Gautam, I think again, everybody here, I suppose, comes from a certain privilege, right? We know that we come from families also who are of a certain class and who um, we're all upper middle class, right? So or more. So we know that, okay, we have the knowledge, and even our parents also have the knowledge that if this is not the end of the world, you can still build a career somewhere else. You still have the opportunity to grow elsewhere. If you want to be financially comfortable, there are many other avenues open. So I don't think I faced a lot of like social peer pressure in that, oh, okay, you tried and failed. It's a lot of inbuilt, or like the Deepak was saying, the dejection comes when you are too hard on yourself. You actually project other people's so-called um, their imprint, or whatever they think about you. You think that, okay, they think of you as a failure, but that's not actually true. It will be hard, or it was hard for maybe the first year after I quit studying for the exam. And that's just a process of, like, the normal process of decoupling. You aspire to be something that didn't work out, so obviously it will take time for you to disassociate. But personally, I did not face a lot of, like, pressure from either my parents or from my social peer group. So I think in that respect, I would say I'm very privileged. I'm very lucky. Nobody's going to look at me and say that, hey, you're not gainfully employed because you don't have a government job. I'm still in their eyes, in most people's eyes, I'm still a well-read, educated individual with my own sense of worth. And even if they don't think of that, of it that way, I know that I am that person. So that's all that matters.
Can I come in that point, Gautam? One sec. Yeah. So one more thing that like Gokul was mentioning, all four of us at this point of time here, somewhere we were in the middle class or the upper middle class society where our parents had a lot of exposure to the real world. They knew the practicalities of this exam, or they knew that they had to give us enough space, even if we were to crack this exam or not. Whatever happens, they were good enough to understand. But again, when we look at Sanjeev Sanyal's remark, he had particularly, he singled out two regions of India. One is Bihar and one is Bengal. Where this poverty of aspirations is actually much more severe than what we can imagine. For them, these people actually, UPSC is like a upward social mobility for them to gain acceptance into the society. Like Gokul mentioned that he had his sense of purpose, so he never, he was able to gain acceptance, or he never had to seek acceptance from anybody. It all went smooth for him, even though he couldn't get it into the crack to the services. But as and when we go to North India, places like Bihar, these guys, for them, it is a way of escape from the poverty, or the social economic conditions that are prevailing there, I think. So in this context, I think Sanyal's remark actually, somewhere it was a blunt truth.
Yeah.
That is where I think this remark actually hit a very raw nerve.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the
Please.
kind of the this part when the news of when this particular news was being shared around in WhatsApp, the kind of backlash that I saw happening in civil service groups, WhatsApp groups as well, was itself very telling. And to be frank, I personally didn't feel much because, like Deepak is saying, what Mr. Sanyal has said is the truth. You are wasting the not wasting, but you are spending the prime of your life on a vocation that you don't really know whether it's for you or not. It's a different thing. But the kind of backlash that I saw within the group, key, how dare he say a bad thing about UPSC? That kind of a reaction is what I saw. Though, like, see, you can call it extreme, but there were a few sane voices who made sense out of it. We're talking about why this poverty of aspiration is there. Aspiration or the thought itself cannot come out of the blue, right? Like Mr. Sanyal himself was saying, unless there's a civilization or unless there is a culture of entrepreneurship or a culture that wants excellence, you cannot have excellence. Like how we were saying, the electorate elects the leader, and the
Mm.
aspirations come from what kind of a society you are in. And fortunately or unfortunately, the kind of society that we are in right now, as in the words of Mr. Sanil, wants aspires to become a joint secretary than a billionaire.
What I feel also is that this process of Gokul mentioned about self-worth, and connected to that is also self-realization, right? Knowing what you're really good at, and building on that. And so first part is knowing what you're really good at and what could you build on, and knowing what kind of opportunities you have around you to extend that into a working opportunity, into a professional setup, like in the sense that it brings money to you. You are working towards that goal, a professional goal. So that is the second step, and the third step being continuing in that and excelling in the job once you get in. So I think these are multiple processes. Now, of course, there are mentorship as an option. You can pursue that. But if you are going for a job outside of civil services, a private job, I think there are multiple steps that are out there that you need to fulfill. So and India as a nation, as a country that provides education, I don't think a lot of schools or not even parents provide that kind of a motivation for students to look into themselves and understand what I'm good at and where can I add the maximum value. That kind of realization does not exist, and that's one major reason why while it is theoretically good, in theoretically true to be saying that, but practical realities of a student in India, pursuing opportunities what he wants and being there are much lesser in nature. And yeah, and I think we have to be aware of that also when that happens. And yeah.
Yeah, just to add to that, Gautam, I think one of the most dangerous things that aspirants can do these days is accumulating knowledge, but not accumulating a certain skill. Because
Mm.
to answer, to just go back to the question you asked me about whether I felt fear, or whether society was had any effect on me when I moved out. Society did not have as much effect on me as much as the corporate environment did, because when I was applying to jobs, they wanted a certain level of skills. So there's no point in saying that, hey, I spent 3 years studying for the most competitive exam in the country. Nobody cares. You can say that I'm an expert in geography, political science, etc., etc., etc. They are only the company who's trying to hire you is only interested in what skill can you provide. Can you make money for me, right? So I think aspirants also overdose on the fact that, okay, I have so much knowledge. Why isn't anybody hiring me? I think we need to also cultivate that sense of building a skill. It could be any skill. It could be working with like code, programming, writing, something like a tool like Photoshop, like podcasting, anything, anything that, unfortunately, we live in a capitalist world. So anything that can provide value to a private company. So that's something that we aspirants should especially look out for.
Quite right, and I'm already seeing glimpses that in the domain that I'm working in as an HR manager, and somebody who's working in the HR fraternity. What I'm increasingly seeing is that we are even moving away from formal degrees. We are moving away from the apparent signs of being competent. So we're actually looking at skills. So more and more companies are the first levels of interviews are being done away with, but they are being replaced by case studies, assessments, simulated assessments, which meant that your skill sets are assessed first. Your The closest thing to knowing whether you're capable of something is to know whether you're able to solve a problem that is in the actual line of work. So organizations are increasingly moving into that space where I don't care if you have a degree or you come from IIT or you have spent 3 years preparing a civil service. All I want to know is can you solve the problem in front of you? Can you satisfy the customer? Can you bring in the money that is required? Or money can replace anything else also. Um, so I think that is the world we are going into, and adding to that is also the entire disruption that's being brought on by AI. I mean, even in my work, my line of work, even in HR, a lot of things that are otherwise done by manually by humans are now replaced by generative AI, right? I mean, things as simple as creating a job description. Now all I need to do is to provide some context, and AI will give me the perfect job description ever made. Of course, I need to give the context, but a lot of that is a lot of operational work, a lot of repetitive tasks is being taken over by AI. So I'm just wondering. I want to hear your thoughts on your line of work, and what do you think? How do you think you can reinvent yourself, given that a lot of things, even in public sector, at some point, I was reading a report by McKinsey that Singapore government has already taken in generative AI in one of their future goals. I mean, can you hiring less people? Can we hire less people and automate a lot of things? Is something they're looking into. So I want to hear your views also on that.
So, in railways as such, see, railways basically is all throughout. It's an engineering organization, right? Civil engineering, mechanical engineering, electronics engineering, and the way AI is coming in is huge. Now, when it will take on a more major role is yet to be seen, but there are already talks of AI based sensors for looking at your damages to the wagons and coaches, AI based. Like recently, I mean, as recent as December, there was a talk about AI cameras to be installed in the pathways across the Palghat section, wherein elephants are roaming across, right, the tracks. And it was a case in the High Court as well. So, to install AI cameras, which will in turn warn the station masters ki the herds of elephants are roaming around at this point of time at this particular location. So the loco pilots of the train engines should be careful. So that is the most recent one. The sensors are there, and especially in HR, we recently had a seminar on how ChatGPT can be used to improve training modules for the employees. The the the, the term upskilling and skilling has come into public sector as well, which is pleasantly surprising to me, because everything is in the public sector. There is a 20-year lag if we are being very optimistic. So the fact that ChatGPT and upskilling terminology is coming into the railways at this point of time is something which I think I'm very happy about, and that, as Gautam was saying, it will improve the way technology is taken in the public sector as well, and probably gear us towards efficiency as well.
Right. So, like, I would like to 100% agree with what Sidharth was saying, because the idea of artificial intelligence, machine learning, picking up leads based on data analytics and recurring patterns, etc. These are things that actually all public sector enterprises nowadays have started using much. If I was to just give one internal example of mine, if you were to look at a manager of a public sector bank 15 years back, he would have to go out in the field market in the market and scout for business leads and bring in leads. But today, if it is business leads that I want, so that I can talk to the customer and close the deal, leads are available to me based on machine learning pattern on my analytics dashboard. So that way, the effort is reduced by almost 20 to 30% in generating the leads. All I now need to do is just reach out them and convert business. And this kind of machine learning recurring pattern is happening, and almost all enterprises are actually using it. And that way, I am pretty much happy because I am able to devote much more time into business development rather than actually filtering leads, because I already have the filtered data available with me. So that is one aspect actually pretty much good about this AI and Chat GPT. And like the debate between whether AI and Chat GPT will replace humans at work, or that is apart, and there is a long time for that yet to come. But at this point of time, if we know how to use it properly, it can be a good slave, but certainly a bad master. It is a good slave, but a bad master, I would say.
About
No,
the fact that whether or not AI will replace humans, I don't think that has ever happened. It's just the more skilled person takes your job. That's it. Like when there was a like the recent seminar in ChatGPT that we were we were having, in that the person, the trainer, he was saying that it's ChatGPT is just like another tool. You just need to know what query to give, and that is a skill that you will learn. The AI machine learns with you, and you learn with it as to how to make the queries. If someone who knows to make the queries better than you, then that person is going to take your job, not AI. The
very
computer did not take your job. The person who could code did.
Very true, very true. But there is always actually there's another concern. Especially if you look at public government institutions or legacy institutions like yours or mine. There is always this one set of people who do actually clerical, menial, paperwork, just pushing files around, draftsman job. And there is a huge sector, especially that. But these jobs certainly I feel are at risk, because tomorrow you need to draft a letter. You don't need a clerk to do that for you. Just input your requirement in ChatGPT, and you have it out, and you just sign it and send it across.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
there is a lot
That's
of
what.
jobs that, especially in your workplace or my workplace, that are going to be redundant.
Yes. So the way we are looking at it right now is what you said, what Deepak said is very true. Like when we used to, whatever basic letters that you have to type out, I used to have it typed out by a person. But then right now we have a template. I just need to change the occasion or just change the context, and I'm getting that letter in less than 5 minutes. So that particular redundant job is out, but the way to look at it, or the way that we are preferring to look at it right now, is that redundant, the time that we used to spend on redundant jobs is now free for other things. And the way that railways, or at least the present dispensation, is looking at making railways grow, if you have seen around, you've seen a lot of development happening infrastructure wise for railways. So the way that the present dispensation is looking at railways to grow, I am thinking that redundancy can be used for newer things. But then right now, I guess we don't have that level of vision right now as to what it could be used for. But then I'm sure that we can actually use this manpower for something better rather than just drafting letters.
Now I have one question for Gautam actually. Gautam, now you are a lot into HR. You deal with people day in and day out. You have been looking at resumes, etc. So now, imagine, say a person who, according to Sanjeev Sanyal's perfect person, who has wasted his youthful life in UPSC pursuit but could not make it, and he's at his early 30s. Now, suppose what are the skills you as a recruiting manager would want him to have, or so that you can actually bring him back into a formal employment.
I mean,
To
a
just
lot
give us
depends.
the antithesis to Sanjeev Sanyal.
A lot depends upon the organization, the function, and the person's interest, the candidate's interest, and the skill set also, of course. But assuming that that person is appearing for civil service, I'm assuming that a lot of he's done some self-reflection, and he's certainly good at expressing himself through written word. So I'm taking that as a one skill set. If that is one skill that he has, that he is able, he is comfortable with expressing himself. He's able to write a business proposal. He's good at copywriting. Maybe he's good at content creation. I think that itself is a great skill to have. It's a fundamental skill that you learn while you prepare for civil service, because you're going through a lot of data. You need to know, like Deepu, you earlier was mentioning, there's a time limit of 8 minutes to express a 20 marks question in that short period of time. So that shows us a couple of things. That shows us that you know how to present data, be it qualitative data, be it quantitative data. That's one thing that I'm knowing through that. Number two, I am knowing that you are a multidisciplinary learner. You're comfortable with multiple topics. I can make use of that. Number three, you work good under stress, because this examination is all about handling stress. On the day, are you in the right mindset? Are you able to give your best? Can the flow of thought comes to you naturally? So I know that you work under stress also. And if I'm to extend this assumption a little bit, you also could be a good person. You have person with an interpersonal skill, because you must have prepared for interviews on the way. Your communication skill should be above average. You should be okay with dealing complicated situations concerning people also. So you could be a good people manager as well, because ultimately bureaucracy after a certain level, it's all about people management. So if I'm to take these skill sets, and I think there are a lot of places that a person like this could fit in. Of course, given the Indian scenario, uh, it's difficult for somebody with no degree or a no formal education to showcase this. So that's a major challenge that people come across, right? I know I have all the skills. I know I could succeed in a role. Perhaps an MBA person is succeeding right now. That could be what a reality is, right? But unless you have the degree to show for, unless that brand opens up the doors for you, it's of course you will get into a job. But if you want to have a faster career progression, my advice would be to go through either through a certification program, which can in which you are super specializing on the particular skill that you have. It could be video editing, it could be anything, right? It could be data analytics, or you go for a generic degree. It could be a management degree, it could be like a public policy degree, it could be like what Gokul did, a journalism one. You go for a it's somewhat of a generic degree, and then then you are able to showcase all that you've learned through civil services through that degree, either through campus placements or through individual applications. That is, I think, certainly how I would look at it. Ideally, I would want to have HR functions to be a little more mature and not look at degrees and a little more focused on skill set. But unfortunately, our hiring mechanisms are still far behind when you look at the Western counterparts. Where if I'm applying for a Western startup, or they'll probably start with an assessment of myself through a simulation or a case study, right? And even before screening happens. So screening happens later. So if you're qualifying that, then you're able to move further. But in Indian companies, very rarely I find that usually there is a screening call by a recruiter calling them up and asking the credentials. The first thing they do is eliminate you basis your brand, where you're coming from, whether you're meeting the minimum requirements. So that's a major challenge that has to change.
Yeah. So I think where connecting like civil service aspirants to AI, what I've been able to notice is that this is coming from the corporate and the tech space. So there is a lot of binary thinking that we see has evolved, especially if you're looking at like the Bay Area startups, especially large learning models, right? Like ChatGPT, like Midjourney, and things like that. recently you might have seen that some of these models have inbuilt biases and stereotypes. It's because all of these AI models have been fed data sets that are essentially biased towards, say, a certain segment of population, or a certain demographic and things like that. And without having like people at the helm of these sort of programs who know how to look at it in a nuanced way, in a balanced way, who know how to include the right people, who know how to bring balance to that particular discussion, that is actually, I think, going to be very, very important going forward. That's actually something that civil service aspirants can translate, and it's not something that AI can take away, right? Because it's still a learning model. It still cannot process a lot of nuance. If you tell them to create a picture of, say, an American man, chances are they will bring the whitest possible person in front of you. So um, there are implications, policy implications for AI everywhere, and to actually analyze these policy implications, you need people, leaders. They can be anybody, like people in marketing, it could be people in HR like you are, it could be people who are working, coding, programming. All of these people need to understand those nuances, and or they need to be led by people who know these nuances, I think. So aspirants are best placed to get into these roles. So like you said, if people can just upskill, certify, get a foot in the door, and then prove themselves in these organizations or in these fields, I think down the line they will be creating as much value as they would be if they were in, say, an IAS or an IPS or IFS or IRS or so on and so forth. So that's my 2 cents on that.
Got it. So I want to come in now that we have exceeded 1 hour mark. I want to come into the last segment, which is some of the recommendations that you had on how. I mean, of course, this can happen overnight, but at the policy level, what are some of the things that could improve the UPSC landscape? I know, Deepu, you had a point around. You've been a supporter of using UPSC scores to be as a high as a one of the metrics to hire in other exams. I want to know more about that. And I want to hear from Sidharth and Gokul also, if you have some recommendations on this.
Yeah, so Gautam, like you mentioned, this is actually a policy that has been partially put into practice, even though it's not a full-fledged policy. I think it was in 2017, the year that I went to the interview. Public sector enterprises and even government organizations like Sports Authority of India, International Financial Services Authority, Gandhinagar, and NTPC, then VHEL, etc. They took a list of UPSC candidates who had gone up to the interview level, and then these candidates could actually directly appear for the interview level at assistant director, associate director positions. So I think that one policy, because in India, even today we have hundreds of central public sector enterprises, state public sector, all these places where these kind of recruitment process or this model applies. Where we have to have a proper recruitment process. So there are two benefits to it in this case. One is that every instead of every organization having a separate recruitment process, the cost could come down for them because they have already a pool of candidates who have proved themselves through a very competitive exam. That is first thing. And second is, this is also reassurance to the candidates because they know or they can be reassured that if they are not making the cut to the holy PDF, as the UPSC results are called, they always have another organization or they always have another public sector organization which offers them a similar job security, even though it's not the kind of acceptance or the prestige, but it offers them the job security they seek much. Then it offers them a stability, and it offers them some amount of reassurance. That is one thing. And I would also like to bring one psychological aspect that I have seen, that is amongst the youth, especially people who are of my younger brother's age, right now in their 20s. Uh, there is this mindset of getting into a stable job, a government job, which was actually reducing in the 1991 after our liberalization era. Right now people actually considering this kind of layoffs happening, the kind of uncertainty in the market, like we call VUCA world. People are actually looking forward for a stable job, even if it is reduced income, or even if it is kind of not to their liking or not to their profile. But if people have an assured income and if people have a stable job, that is the trend is changing. Actually, the IT revolution is gone right now, and people are actually looking forward for a stable job and assured income. So
Correct.
that kind of mindset is actually slowly creeping back in. So at this point of time, if this could become a well researched and well executed policy, a lot of the government can save a lot of cost in terms of this kind of recruitment. That is where I think this policy, if properly implemented, could go a long way.
uh, 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 so the problem, the reason why I feel that that particular policy could not, in the long term be this thing is probably, see, because organizations like NTPC and all the PSUs, they require a professional degree, like an engineering degree. They require it, and the problem, or the limiting factor could be the fact that of the 1,000 people who do attend the interview, not all of them have a BTech degree. You cannot have a BA history person become a manager at an oil field in the rigs, right? So that might be a limitation. A limiting factor is what my understanding is. That is the reason probably why a lot of PSUs don't want this particular thing. I mean, if you have a degree, then it makes sense. But if you don't, then what is the problem? And once you are actually, once you go for it, because see, all these PSUs have a recruitment cycle, and once you are breaking that cycle and going through UPSC, then coming back to the circle, that is double the cost, right? And if it doesn't work out, so you can never predict what are the what is the kind of people who are coming in to appear for the interviews. You can never predict that. Like that, that mix is getting varied, right? I think the 2010s it was mostly engineers. Now I think it's changing, and in the early 2000s it was the other way around. It was mostly liberal arts. So that keeps on changing. So the kind of companies that Deepak was mentioning, most of them, to my understanding, require a basic degree, like what Gautam was mentioning, more often than the skill. Unfortunately or fortunately, we are still in a society that, or still in a world where you require that degree, right? So that could be a limiting factor. Otherwise, yes, the fact that these are the cream of the youth of the country right now, who have spent that much time. So if you can utilize their skills in your organization, that would be wonderful for the organization. But can you? That is the question. And the fact that the skills that Gokul was mentioning earlier, the skill set, the knowledge is not enough. There was a meme that came, that would come around at the time when we were appearing for interviews and not qualifying. There would mean in the Manichitra movie, that meme would be there, ki enike geography itra ariyam. But then the other person is like, I, right? So there's no point. So it's the skill that they require. So do you have that? Is what matters.
Yeah. So I believe that all of these smaller exams also have their own like core base of people who are studying for that alone, like PSC or Coal India or bank exams and stuff like that. So I'm assuming that there will be a very big backlash from those segment of population who will be like, we've been studying for this dedicatedly, and we are more skilled, or we are in tune with what the organization is required. I mean, sure, you qualified for UPSC, but or you qualified to go to the interview, but what specialty does that add? So there is always that aspect. And I think if you look at it from a corporate standpoint also, I mean, just playing the devil's advocate, but I don't think that a lot of people will value the fact that, okay, you went till the interview, because there is a mismatch of incentives. People will be, I'm assuming that the hiring manager will look at your resume and say, okay, so you thought that you were cut out for public service. Where's the guarantee that you will still want to continue in a corporate job? Maybe you will get a corporate job and then you'll study for the civil services again, and then you'll attempt it again, and maybe you leave in like the next 1 year or 2 years. So I suppose transitioning from a public to a corporate job using UPSC as a credential may not work. I mean, I'm not sure. There might be other aspects to it as well, but that's one thing that I feel. Um, it always seems a hurdle when I think about it.
Yeah, that's actually a very valid point, Gokul, that he has just made. Because even people who are in the civil services keep writing the exam again. Like I have known so many people who, while we were in the training, they wouldn't come to the training classes. Why? Because they are sitting and preparing for an interview or for a mains. So that is going to happen at all points of time. Like those who have cleared the interview, I mean, those who have appeared for the interview but could not make the cut, they are definitely going to write the next time, right? So why would an organization go through the process of recruiting such a person? It doesn't make sense for them, right?
I agree with what Gokul and Sidharth actually were saying. That is one aspect, very logical aspect that every organization, before taking a person off the UPSC list and recruiting them, has to certainly think of. But again, the entire problem with the UPSC process is if you don't make it through the interview, you're back to square one. And you're again competing with another batch of, maybe a couple of lakhs of freshers who have just graduated that year and are planning to make it into a part of that elite list. So somewhere I think there needs to be some parallel bridge for the UPSC candidate who has gone up to the interview level to transition into a job, if not the services. And that I think as a HR manager, Gautam, if you were given a potential list of UPSC candidates, say 200 candidates who are suitable for any organization, or if you were to scrutinize, what would something that you would want, or would you go for it? Would you take a bet on them?
I would. Depends upon the organization also. If I'm a public policy organization, or if I'm an organization that focuses on creating content, or that's or provide some sort of services, right? If I'm a fundamentally a service-based organization, I would I would I would look into that list and see if there are people who can fit into. I would obviously filter them like an oil company would filter out an engineer. I would put filters on it. I would want to have that kind of filters available for me. That's the fundamental thing, so that I can look into the data, do some analysis, and find out who could be one of the better candidates out there. Also, one other factor I would consider is that this is I've seen, in person also, is the age of the person. So generally, what happens is when you look into people who are getting into this management development program, which is the entry point of usually the entry point which people are hired from campus through MBA programs, right? And they get into this management development program where they do multiple stints in the company. They are doing finance, marketing, all different parts of the organization's value chain. Now, the reason why organizations do this is because they want to pick people who are very impressionable, who can be molded into their culture, who can be made part of their cadre, and develop themselves as leaders. Now, if you are giving me somebody who's at 30 or 32, uh, I mean, of course, there are exceptions, but generally seeing, people would be fixed in their value system, fixed in their approach, fixed in their way of working. And it is also possible that the years of grinding out in UPSC must have made them complacent, must have drained out their emotional energy. Not everybody is active in their mind also. I mean, physically they could be active, but mind has to have some curiosity, some creativity, some motivation to go over and beyond, and that's how you are measured in organizations, right? So that is one aspect I would look into: how healthy their minds are, how curious their minds are. Do they still have that fire in them to make a difference? Um, so, I mean, obviously, all these quantitative factors will matter, but softer aspect would be one aspect of this where that is one of the. I mean, you could see that is one strong reason why you should quit early. I mean, quitting early would. I'm not suggesting that they should blindly quit, but the moment they realize they're not fit skill wise or other parameters, social parameters, there are options. Otherwise, you should grab it early before the time runs out and you yourself don't have the energy to push further. So that is how I would see it. So yeah, I mean, I know that we've crossed the 1 hour 15 minutes mark. So I want to end this with a question to all of you, and maybe you can give me like one final summary here. That if somebody who's young, or somebody who's currently pursuing civil services, who's young and who's got that a glitter in his or her eyes of making into civil services, then that person comes to you and asks you, okay, I've heard this comment from Sanyal. I'm a little confused. What could be a couple of things I can do? I can think about what are some of the parameters I can evaluate myself, or how should I see this? How should I see my career going forward? And what do you suggest? I mean, you want your thoughts, and we can end it with that. Deepu, I will start with you if you have any thoughts around that. Your final parting thoughts.
All right. I think I would want Gokul or Siddharth to go on this first
Okay,
because I
Gokul then.
think
Sure,
personally they would have a lot more to say on this more
sure,
than
sure.
me.
Yeah, so okay, I think I would probably give them my 2 cents by probably I would give them a few points, like maybe three main points. I would probably ask them to get some level of work experience first before they even attempt the exam, because I've realized that if things don't go your way, that work experience can be a really valuable addition to get back into whatever you want to do. It will give you networks, it will give you opportunities to really, pivot, to do that pivot. Um, the second thing is, I would say if you're attempting the exam, don't do it for more than, I think, 2 attempts at least, or 2 years, depending on how much time it takes. So I would say don't completely devote time for the UPSC exam for more than 2 years. I think 2 years, 2 attempts should be more than enough for you to actually study everything, the breadth of knowledge that is required, and then give 2 good attempts. And if that does not work out, get a job and then try again is what I would say, or you can pivot out of the organization. And the third is, I think the most important would be, regardless of whether you are successful in your attempt or not, don't make it your entire personality. So if you are successful, good for you. You're a bureaucrat. You have a bright career ahead of you, but it's always good to have another aspect of yourself, right? So, for example, Siddharth, I'm pretty sure that he has other interests, he has other hobbies. He would like to be known as a person with, uh, a part outside of the IRPS. Similarly, if you're somebody who has failed in the exam and who wants to move forward, don't make it your entire personality to the point that, don't keep saying to yourself, oh, I failed at this and so I am moving on. No, it just didn't work out, and so you're just moving on. So don't make that a part of your personality. So um, anyone comes and asks me, I would say definitely go give it a shot. It is worthy, like Mr. Sanyala said, whether or not you have clarity of what an administrator does, it is a worthy endeavor. But keep in mind these things, have a backup plan, and don't let it all get to your head.
So I had a conversation with a cousin of mine who was appearing for the civil services. It was his fourth attempt or something. He came, with the same question. What should I do? Should I go ahead with it? Actually had to spend around almost 2 hours to try and convince him to not write again, because I was telling him. So he was fresh out of college, keeping on writing the examination. So what I was telling him is, get a job first. Get a job first, and like so. So the way I convinced him is, you have to stop depending upon your parents now, right? See, it was the parents' goal to see the child as a bureaucrat, as an IAS officer, and now it has become the child's goal, right? Once you get into that vortex, he's keeping on doing that same thing over and over again. So the way I convinced the person was by telling them that you get a job on your own now, since it has become your goal. You should probably fund the same as well. So, and now, and I'm coming to know he has left the civil service circle. He's working somewhere else and is very happy, right? I don't know. I mean, I don't know personally whether he's happy or not, whether that dejection is there or not. But at least he has a career now, because we know how much of a factor luck plays in. So whoever has asked me about what aspects should we keep in mind while appearing for the UPSC, I keep on telling them the 2 attempts, maximum of 2 attempts, 2 or 3 should be maximum. Like, I used to think that 4 attempts was the ideal one, but then they made it 6. 4 attempts should be maximum. 3 attempts are ideal for someone, because we know how much of a factor luck is. Gautam, Deepak, we all know how many of bright minds there were, right? When we see inside the service, I can guarantee it that there are so many more brighter minds outside of it who could not make it because they were just not lucky on that day, right? So that's what I tell them. Luck is such a huge factor of someone making it or not. So that particular aspect has to be drilled into the mind of a person who wants to write the exam, so that they don't think that it's because they are not worth it. It's because on that particular day, and that's true for every competitive examination, right? An entrance examination, an IIT examination. You may be good enough for an IIT, just you couldn't, mark the right bubbles on that particular day. So that particular aspect is the most important aspect, and the rest of the things what Gokul said ditto the same. Regarding the fact that your knowledge, the fact the wide reading that you need, the backup option that you have, the fact that you need to know when you need to pivot. Keep and one thing I would always tell a person is to keep the non UPSC crowd in the loop as well. The one thing that we do is we surround ourselves with UPSC people and lose track of where the rest of the world is going. So keep a track of those friends as well, so that they tell you, this is where the world is right now. It's like someone waking up from a coma. Finding it difficult to get back into the world. That should not be the case. So you should have an idea of, so that helps. What Gokul was saying, having a work experience helps that way to get back into the back into the employment structure, so to speak. So those two aspects, and rest of it, whatever Gokul said, I completely agree with him. That the limitation you should set yourself, and the fact that there should be the you should be very aware of how important luck is, and you should always have people outside of the exam circle to keep on talking to at least once a week.
So adding to what Gokul and Sidharth said, I mean, they have pretty much covered everything that even I wanted to say. Just 2 points I would like to add. If somebody asked me for an advice, or if somebody asked me for an input, I would never quantify them to 2 to 3 attempts or 2 or 3 attempts. I would never quantify them. As personally, I wouldn't want to. But I would certainly tell them to, two things. Keep in mind two things. To keep your expectations always low from this exam, and to not attach yourself to this dream, and not to become another Sandeep Bhaiya actually. So that you end up losing a lot of things in the other domains of your life, your personal life, your friends, your family, your other interests. So never hook yourself to the dream. And this, it comes from my heart, because this is something, I have been fighting this feeling of being a failure and dejection almost for quite a couple of years, since 2018. Even today, that 15th March 2018, that date flashes in my mind every time when I went in for my UPSC interview. So from there to, not get disappointed, not give up on myself, and, to detach myself from that middle class Indian dream, it took a lot of effort for me. That is one thing I would always say any aspirant. Life is much larger than that. You need to have a personal life. You need to have your friends. You need to look at your family. There is a world outside there. So don't hook yourself to the dream so much that you don't see anything outside. So that is only one aspect I would give. You write 2 attempts, you write 4 attempts, you write 6 attempts. That's totally your call. You know better on what you want to do with your life. But if you don't make it, you don't have to get disappointed. You shouldn't lose your self-esteem or self-worth. Like always, this Sharman Joshi says in Three Idiots actually, sir, life में कुछ ना कुछ ढंग का कर ही लूंगा. You should have that kind of an attitude, and probably things will fall back onto track, no matter even if you give 6 attempts and you are nowhere close to the rank list. But if you have that kind of a mindset, somewhere life में कुछ ना कुछ ढंग का actually कर ही लोगे तुम. So that kind of attitude if you keep, I think the scope for disappointment reduces for them. That would be my advice. It comes from experience actually.
So much for all this. So thank you first for taking the time out to be here and to share all this. I know all of you are busy in your own work and personal life, and thank you for sharing this 1.5 hours with me for the podcast. I'm sure that people who are listening, somebody who is interested in pursuing civil, if they listen to this, they'll have a perspective different to what they were having earlier. They would have a view of people who have done it and made it, and people who have not made it, and how they've gone ahead and tackled that tricky situation. So it's a great, I'm sure it's going to be a great listen. So thank you so much, everyone. I would want to have you even in the coming podcast also on other topics as well. So looking forward to hosting this amazing panel again. So yeah, best for everybody. Do subscribe. People who are listening, please do subscribe. Please share the word. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so
Thanks.
much for having
Thanks,
us. Thank
Gautam.
you.
Thanks, guys.